How poor we are. In a small town in France, there was a rich artist named Francois. He lived with his daughter Sophie in a large villa, surrounded by gardens and a swimming pool. Francois, proud of his wealth, always thought that Sophie had the best of everything in life. However, he wanted his daughter to understand the difference between rich and poor, so he decided to take Sophie to visit a farming family living simply in the remote countryside. The father and daughter went to the small village and visited a farming family. This family lived in a small wooden house, without the modern conveniences that Francois and Sophie were familiar with. But what surprised Sophie was the joyful, warm atmosphere of the family. The children played in the meadow with the dog, the family worked in the fields, took care of the livestock, and in the evening the whole family gathered together under the starry sky, without electricity or TV. After returning to the villa, Francois asked his daughter, "How was your trip?" Sophie replied, "It was wonderful, Dad." Francois was surprised and asked, "Did you see how poor the other family was?" Sophie thought for a moment and then said, "We have high walls, they have the whole sky. We have lights, they have stars. We have swimming pools, they have rivers. We have good food, but they have the joy of growing their own food and taking care of their families." Francois was silent, surprised by Sophie's answer. She looked at her father and added, "We may be rich in material things, but they are rich in more important things: family affection, connection with nature, and simple joys." Francois thought deeply about what his daughter said. He realized that money and material possessions cannot buy true happiness. The peasant family, though not wealthy, lived happily with the values that Francois and Sophie had forgotten in their extravagant lives. Lesson learned: wealth is not measured by money or possessions alone, but by love, family bonds, and joy in the simple things in life. Sometimes, it is the little things that bring the greatest happiness.
The chatterbox syndrome. One evening, as the wife was busy in the kitchen, slicing, stirring, and flipping with the grace of a seasoned chef, her husband stood by, offering a never-ending stream of advice. "Watch out, you're chopping too fast. Flip the fish now, before it burns. Careful, that's way too much oil. The heat's too high. Are you frying or burning it?" The wife, her patience wearing thin, finally turned to him and said, "I know how to cook, you know." With a calm and almost playful tone, her husband responded, "Of course you do, darling. I'm not doubting your skills at all. But," he paused dramatically for effect, "I just wanted you to get a little taste of how it feels when I'm driving and you're in the passenger seat giving me non-stop advice." Realization dawned on her, and she couldn't help but chuckle. "Ah, I see. So this is your idea of payback." He grinned, looking quite pleased with himself. "Not payback, my love. Just a small lesson in empathy." The wife, now smiling, shook her head. "All right, point taken, but if this fish burns, you're eating every last bite of it." The lesson: sometimes, the best way to understand someone's irritation is to experience it yourself. The husband's playful approach wasn't just about getting even, it was a clever and humorous way to teach empathy. We often think we're helping when we offer constant advice, but when the roles are reversed, we realize how exhausting it can be.
The king and his sore feet. Once upon a time, in a prosperous kingdom, a king decided to go on a grand adventure around his land. After days of wandering, he returned to the palace in a foul mood, complaining, "My feet are killing me. The roads are full of rocks and bumps." Determined never to suffer such discomfort again, the king issued an absurd decree: cover every road in the kingdom with leather. His ministers scrambled to figure out how to accomplish this impossible task. But before they could get too far, the wife of a clever servant approached the king with a bold suggestion. "Your Majesty," she said, "why waste so much leather on the roads when you can just use a small piece to cover your feet?" The king blinked in surprise. Then, after a moment of thought, he burst out laughing. "You're absolutely right. Why didn't I think of that?" And so, instead of covering the kingdom in leather, the king had the first pair of shoes made. His feet were happy, and the road stayed just as rocky as ever. The lesson: why try to change the world when a little adjustment to yourself can make life much easier? Just like the king realized he didn't need to pave the entire kingdom with leather, we too can find happiness by changing our own perspective. Sometimes, all you need is a good pair of shoes.
The story, The Mouse Fell into the Jar of Rice. Once upon a time, in a green forest, there was a little mouse who lived skillfully and cautiously. One day, while searching for food, he suddenly discovered a treasure, a jar of wheat sparkling in the sunlight. Having not had any luck for a long time, the mouse did not hesitate to jump into the jar. His eyes lit up when he saw the abundant food source he had accidentally encountered. At first, the mouse was very cautious, quietly observing the surroundings to make sure there was no danger lurking. After a few peaceful days, he gradually forgot his initial fear, and began to live in abundance, with wheat everywhere, without any worries. Day after day, the mouse ate, slept, and ate again, enjoying an easy life. Life in the jar was so peaceful that it forgot everything, even the instinct to run away from danger. Time passed, the jar of wheat gradually ran out, but the mouse still did not want to leave. Even though it knew the rice was running out, it could not resist the temptation of the last grains. One day, when the rice in the jar was gone, the mouse woke up, looked around and realized that it no longer had the strength to jump out. The peaceful days had made it forget that it had to conserve its strength. Now, before its eyes was only an empty jar, and the mouse was trapped, with no way out. The lesson from the story, The Mouse Fell into the Jar of Rice, emphasizes four main ideas. The trade-off between the present and the future. Do not indulge in short-term comfort and forget to prepare for the future, because resources do not last forever. Self-control and self-discipline. Knowing how to control yourself in the face of temptation is a way to maintain a balance between enjoyment and responsibility. Be alert to potential risks, even in the most favorable circumstances. It is necessary to stay alert so as not to be surprised by hidden risks. Self-reliance and personal responsibility. Always be ready with the skills and knowledge to be self-reliant and get out of trouble when things change.
Story, Await and Justice. Once upon a time, in a small village, there was a butcher who often bought rice from a farmer. The two men had frequent dealings with each other, and things went smoothly for a long time. One day, the butcher began to suspect that the farmer was not selling him the agreed amount of rice. Thinking that he might have been cheated, he decided to weigh each bag of rice. After checking, he found that each bag of rice seemed to be lighter than the agreed amount. Dissatisfied, the butcher immediately took the farmer to court, accusing him of cheating him. At the trial, the judge asked the farmer, "Can you explain how you weighed the rice to sell to the butcher?" The farmer calmly replied, "Sir, I don't have an accurate scale like everyone else uses. Instead, I rely on the meat that the butcher sold me. When I bought his meat, I weighed it and put back the exact amount of grain equal to the amount of meat I received from him. If there was any shortage, it probably came from the weight the butcher gave me." The judge smiled and asked the butcher, "Would you like to review the way you weigh the meat?" Lesson: life is a mirror, what you give will come back to you. Dishonesty will be met with dishonesty, and fairness will be met with fairness.
Thanks for listening. Hello and see you again in Small Stories of Life Part 28.